I'm Brie, and this is my sister Jules. I'm an English teacher.
And I'm here for the wine.
And together, we drink wine and we unpack the brilliant writing of the hit 90s sitcom, Boy Meets World. Cheers!
Cheers.
All right, what are we drinking today?
So we are drinking a wine that I have been drinking for a number of years. It is called Gavi. It is from the year 2022, 12% alcohol. The grape is a Cortez or Cortese. But you can essentially get it at any wine store, whether you get a grocery store or a liquor store. It's pretty common.
Yeah, La Scolca. Isn't that what it's called?
Yes.
Yes, I've seen it. It's a really pretty label. All right, cheers.
Cheers.
Let's taste it. That's delicious.
How would you describe it?
Well, I'm starting a podcast with a cold. Episode 1. So I can't taste it as well as I could if I didn't have a cold. But I'll say this. I like a wine that tastes a little bit minerally. Like I like almost like you're licking a wet slate. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like when it rains and it rains on slate and you get that smell. Okay, when I was a child, I used to like to eat chalk. I used to like take the little nums and eat them, and that's what that like earthy smell. That's what this has, and I love it. It takes me back.
Interesting. I wasn't getting notes of chalk, but you know, I realize as I'm talking, I am terrible at describing wine.
End of podcast. Thanks, guys. We will not be doing this anymore.
But you know, I'm sure there are plenty of people like me who enjoy a glass of wine, can't describe it for their lives, appreciate sommeliers for what they do, and, you know, they're just here to have a good time and drink a good wine. And this is a good wine.
This is a good wine. All right, let's get into what we're really here to do, which is to talk about the pilot. The pilot of Boy Meets World. Do we know why it's called a pilot?
That is a great question. I think I did hear this on a podcast, but I completely forgot why it's called a pilot.
Does it have anything to do with like flying, like pilots?
That's all I think of.
Yeah.
But that also makes no sense.
Anyway, clearly we prepared for this. So it's literally called Pilot, in parentheses, Boy Meets World. And the synopsis, according to Disney Plus, that's what we watched it on, right? Is love is a many confusing thing for 11-year-old Corey Matthews. All right, episode 1. This is directed by John Tracy, which I noticed he only directed this episode. And then for the rest of the entire series, almost, like for the rest of the season and all of next season, David Traynor directs all of those episodes. So I was trying to look into why. No idea. But he directed like Full House and Growing Pains and all these other awesome 90s shows that we love. It was written by Michael Jacobs and April Kelly. I love that there was a woman who co-wrote this.
Yes.
First impressions?
First impressions, it's very much a pilot, if that makes sense, right? You can always feel the newness of a show where the actors are clearly getting comfortable with each other and getting comfortable in their own character. And not having seen this show before, seeing them perform for the first time as these characters is always very interesting to see.
Can I counter that?
Sure.
I was very impressed by how not like a pilot it seemed. I was like, wow, Corey, first of all, is brilliant.
Yes,
he's
absolutely.
Oh my gosh, Ben Savage is so confident and comfortable and fun and charming. For a kid, I mean, is he, I should have looked this up, but is he really 11? He certainly seems like he is.
The actor?
Yeah.
I would imagine he's about 11 years old.
Right, like 11 to maybe highest 13. I can't imagine him being even 14.
Yeah, I don't even think he's a teenager yet.
Right?
Yeah.
And he's so good. And then, like, the relationship between him and his mom. I mean, the Betsy Randall, is that her name? She is incredible as his mom. She already seemed like she had been raising her boys. Like, as excited as she got for Eric when that girl, like, accepted his, you know, asking her out. She was like, oh my God, Eric. She said, yes. I'm so, like, she was so genuinely happy for him. Alan was like, he seemed like he lived in that house. Like, everybody was so crisp for a pilot. And I was very impressed.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think to your point, it felt like we were kind of jumping in into their lives versus their lives are starting for the first time on this podcast or in the pilot rather.
Exactly. Okay. We start off in the lunchroom in the cafeteria. They have incredible vending machines. They're like, did you notice?
I didn't notice what were in them.
They were just big vending machines. And one of them had all fruit, which I found really interesting. And I thought that was like a choice. And then the other one was all like junk food. And so Corey goes over to the one with all the junk. Mr. Feeney comes over as, makes a sarcastic comment about him not making a healthy choice in the morning. Which Corey says something like, yeah, I need to get the taste of the Wheaties out of my mouth. My favorite is Corey's response to him, which is, I hope you're enjoying that high vitamin astronaut drink you're drinking, because he's drinking coffee.
I didn't get that. I wasn't sure what he meant by that.
Oh, 100. I mean, maybe it's a teacher thing, but I do fully feel the hypocrisy of when I call them out, or when I'm not like mean about it, but I'll like make comments like, hey, like you're going out to lunch today. A lot of schools, they have like open campuses, and I happen to work at a school that does have that. And like the kids will go out and I'll be like, make a healthy choice today or whatever it is. And then like I feel terrible because I'm sitting here drinking coffee, and like, or I'll have a kid drinking a Celsius and I'm like, I can't tell them not to drink Celsius when I'm drinking coffee. Like I can't do it. So I loved that. I was like rooting for Corey. I was like, that's a really good one. If my student said that to me, I'd be like, touche. Then we head into the classroom and we introduce the motif of the episode, which is Romeo and Juliet, right? Like this whole, there's a message that this episode is trying to send about love, right? What did you feel the message was?
That's a great question. My answer changed by the end. I sort of thought or expected that this would be a very interesting story about Romeo and Juliet, and that would feed into Corey's eventual relationship with Topanga over a number of seasons.
I thought so too.
I didn't realize that she wasn't even in the pilot. So to see at the end that it was kind of about love in general, and that could mean a lot of things: love for family, love for friends, love for yourself. I thought that was really interesting.
I did too. I wonder if the writers were going as deep as, knowing that they were going to take Corey into this love affair with Topanga that was going to last the entire series, and planting this seed, because as a teacher, right, the way that Feeney talks to him about love, and we're going to get to it, is so impactful. Like that kind of, I feel like they wrote that scene to be something that is meant to stick with Corey for the rest of his life. And so if Feeney teaches him that there is nothing worth living for, nothing other than love, like love lifts us up where we belong. All you need is love. Then, that's going to sit with Corey, and that's going to kind of be the driving force behind the choices he makes. It's going to be the reason he fights so hard for Topanga. It's going to be where all of his beliefs about love come from, because he does become that.
He's a big lover boy.
He is a big lover boy. And so to see him not being a lover boy yet, and to see Feeney plant that seed in him, was really cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so these 11-year-olds are reading Romeo and Juliet, which is hilarious. I would never do Romeo and Juliet with like 6th grade, which is the grade I believe they're supposed to be in, because that's what grade you'd be in as an 11-year-old.
Can I drop tea, by the way? I've never read Romeo and Juliet. It was never on the curriculum for me.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So I don't know what happens.
Juicy. It's really good. It's a complicated plot. Mr. Feeney, first of all, I have to call him out on this. So Mr. Feeney says, before we get to that. So Corey and Sean are in the back of the room listening to a ball game on a radio, 90s, and which is like the equivalent of a kid just being on their phone, fully watching like a movie while class is happening, which totally happens.
Or streaming the game on ESPN Plus.
Totally. And it's 100% happening in every school.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, but there are 2 kids at the front that are like acting out the final scene in Romeo and Juliet. And I will say I was like, wait, is that what happens? Because the kid playing Romeo has a dagger in his hand, and the kid playing Juliet is dead. And the way I remember things happening in the play, because I haven't taught it in a while, Juliet drinks a potion given to her by Friar Lawrence that is supposed to put her in like a fake death. Like it's going to knock her out for 48 hours or 42 hours or something. And she is supposed to, what's going to happen is her family is going to think she's dead. They're going to bury her. And that's how she's going to escape. She's basically faking her death. So her family buries her and then she gets to run off with Romeo. So, but there's like a whole communication mix up, and basically a messenger is supposed to tell Romeo of the plan and say, go to the crypt. She's not going to really be dead, you know, and then you guys can run off together. But instead, he gets the message that she killed herself. Like he gets the message that everybody else thinks is true, which is that she's actually dead. So he goes, he finds her. She's not like awake yet from the stupor she's in. So he I forgot how he got his own poison, but he had his own poison that was real. And when he finds her dead, assuming she's really dead, he drinks the poison and kills himself for real. And then she goes and wakes up, and then she sees that he killed himself for real, and she tries to like kiss him and like get the poison off his lips, but it's not enough. So she takes his dagger and kills herself.
Brutal.
It's so good.
You spoiled the whole ending for me.
You know what? It's crazy that you have never even like watched it.
I knew about the ending.
Okay. So that kind of confused me because the kid was like, Feeney was like, you have to kill yourself now. And I was like, but he drinks the poison. But I'm like, maybe Romeo like was about to kill himself with a dagger and then couldn't and then used the poison. I don't remember. But low key, Feeney might have been like a little bit wrong about how Romeo and Juliet ends. But one thing I will say that he was definitely wrong about, or at least like didn't go as deep as his character really should have gone into Romeo and Juliet, is he says Romeo and Juliet is Shakespeare's ultimate testament of love between a man and a woman. And like, I don't think that's the case. Like, I honestly think that this play is about two dumb teenagers because Shakespeare is very smart. Romeo is brooding at the beginning of the play because he is in love with this other woman, this girl, Rosalind. And he is at this masquerade and he's all mopey because he can't get over Rosalind. And then he sees Juliet and he falls in love with her and she has a mask on. And like, they don't even see each other. And it's just, I think that it's Shakespeare telling us a message about like the fickleness of love, or just how, especially in adolescence, love is kind of random. Like it just kind of comes to you. It has nothing to do with the other person. And I also have come to this conclusion having read Midsummer. Have you read A Midsummer Night's Dream?
I have.
And I think that's like the main point of it, right? Everybody's just falling in love with everyone because these fairies are just messing with humans for fun. That is what I think Shakespeare thinks about love. Interesting.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And I see that the randomness of love, I think, makes sense with the show. So it's interesting that Mr. Feeney kind of got that wrong.
Or he's just very romantic and reads it differently.
Yeah.
Because I have had students read these things in different ways, and I always accept different interpretations. I just sometimes disagree, personally. But for the most part, the kids do think Romeo is annoying. And that's what, like, if you see the Broadway play and Juliet, they really lean into the fact that Romeo is just, like, kind of annoying.
Like a mopey, annoying teenager.
Yeah. And Juliet, the whole premise of that show is like, what if Juliet didn't kill herself and she just like learns to find her own power?
Ooh.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I would watch that. I would read that.
It's a really good play. I loved it. All right. So Corey's like, who cares if some guy like killed himself or some dumb girl? And Feeney says the tragedy here, Mr. Matthews, is not about a dumb girl or the boy who kills himself because of her. It's about the all-consuming power of love and the inevitability of its influence on each of our lives. Which is beautiful. I don't think I'd ever say that to an 11-year-old. I mean, inevitability is a word we'd highlight in our books, and we'd go and Google what it means. And then we'd write in the margins what it means. And then we'd go, okay, so now that we know what that word means, what do you think Mr. Feeney's trying to say? Like, he talks to Corey like he's like an old man. So Corey's like, are you aware that I'm only 11 years old? And Feeney's like, are you aware that you have detention Friday afternoon? And of course, Friday is the same day as the Phillies game that Corey wants to see. So then we get a scene in the bedroom where Corey and Eric are talking about that Phillies game, and Eric basically informs Corey that he is ditching Corey. He I guess, promised Corey that he was going to take him to the Phillies game on Friday. He had 2 tickets, but now he's ditching him because he asked a girl out, and she said yes, so he's going to take the girl instead of Corey, right? And Corey's pissed. Would you be mad?
I think differently than Corey. And I think that's because I'm a girl. I feel like I would be really excited for you. Well, it also depends on what we were going to see. Like, if we had tickets to see Taylor Swift and you were like, actually, I'm taking my date to Taylor Swift, not you, I would move out as well.
That's what I think is what it is for Corey. Like, I think it is his Taylor Swift.
It is his Taylor Swift. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I don't think he was being too dramatic. I think he was right on the mark by living in the tree house.
Yeah. Moving out.
Yeah.
That is the logical.
He emancipated himself from his parents and his siblings. He was like, I'm done. I'm out. I'm gone.
But I will still accept your chocolate pie and barbecue chicken.
Correct.
Okay, so he moves out. And while he's in the treehouse, he looks over through Mr. Feeney's window, because we have found out in this episode that they live next door to each other. And he sees Feeney. It's really well done. William Daniels. He was in The Graduate.
No.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah, he's like the father in The Graduate.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was famous on an 80s show called St. Elsewhere as well. Anyway, big actor.
Big actor. He's been around for so long, and he's still around, which is incredible.
Incredible. I think it was like a big get for the show. Like, it was exciting that they had William Daniels. Anyway, he does an amazing job. It's completely silent, and yet just little movements that he makes with his body portray so much. So he picks up the phone. First of all, he has dinner set up on his dining room table. Then he gets a call, and he kind of just he looks dejected. He kind of does this nervous thing with his hands where he makes a fist. And then he hangs up the phone with a little bit of annoyance, but not in like a rude way.
Yeah, like he feels the agitation, and
agitation.
He responds quickly with that, and I think he pulls it in because he's Mr. Feeney and he's got to be reserved.
Totally. And then he just starts taking one of the place settings away. And then he sits down and he serves himself salad. Mm-hmm. And Corey
also takes a bite of what he was eating, as Mr. Feeney is. So in a way, it really was like they were eating dinner together,
which is really sweet.
It was very sweet. It's a really great. It's really great to have this in the pilot where we are seeing the relationship between Mr. Feeney and Corey, and how we know that their relationship is going to be a really big deal over the next 7 years.
Totally. And I just love Corey's character too, because he's so, he's such a kid sometimes, but then he's so wise, and he represents very well that very true thing that kids have this tendency, this capacity to be so wise sometimes,
And Mr. Feeney definitely knows that, and that's why he cares so much for him.
Totally.
And is willing to kind of see through and kind of deal with his childish, annoying tendencies, because he can see how wonderful and wise he is, and how he's going to grow up to be like a wonderful man.
And he pushes Corey more than he pushes any of the other kids, because he can see that in him.
Yes.
At least that's the way I see it. And he's not wrong, The speech that Feeney gives Corey in detention captures so many teacher things for me. And so I want to really unpack it. So Corey sees Feeney get canceled on. We get this little in-between scene, which I think is really amazing. It's a great scene for Betsy Randall. She is really playful with Corey, puts a toy gun against his back and is like, hey, let go of my son's underwear, because Corey's getting more clothes for his treehouse stay because he doesn't live there anymore. And they have a really quick conversation that I think does so much. She just tells Corey, you also kind of abandoned your dad in the same way that Eric abandoned you. Your dad and you used to throw football around, and when you got older, you got friends and you started to want to hang out with them more. And your dad was kind of upset about that. And when you get older, priorities change. And just like it's okay that you did that, it's okay that Eric is changing his priorities. And kind of also suggesting like that's going to happen for you too. Girls are going to become more of a priority for you when you get older.
Yeah, I thought that was so perfectly and simply stated and easy for Corey to understand.
And I think that's a really big childhood thing.
Yeah.
Priorities changing as you get older.
And that feeling of abandonment that Corey felt is so real, especially for an 11-year-old feeling abandoned by their older brother who's like 4 or 5 years older than him. His older brother he looks up to more than anybody in the world, and to feel like he's losing him to somebody else, like losing him to women who he doesn't understand, right? Because he's not of that age to care yet, is one of the worst feelings ever.
Totally.
It's like your world is coming down.
Totally. And juxtaposed with the Romeo and Juliet stuff, it's great. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Really good writing. I thought it was just fantastic.
Yeah.
The way they used Romeo and Juliet to show how much Corey has to learn about love. I don't think Romeo and Juliet's the best example, as I mentioned earlier, but everybody knows it. So I think it was a good choice for a TV show that apparently 16.5 million people watched.
Wow.
The pilot.
Wow. What channel was it on?
ABC. Yeah. ABC's TGIF.
TGIF.
Remember?
Yes. Oh, I loved watching. Does anybody remember the movie that would play every Friday night on TGIF?
There was one movie that played every Friday?
No.
Oh.
A different movie every week, and it was always the best movie. It was always like The Parent Trap, and it was such a vibe.
Oh, wow. Yes. Okay, so we're in detention. First thing I noticed was there's an image of the Globe Theater. There's like a poster of the Globe Theater behind Feeney, which I thought was a nice touch. It's realistic.
Yeah.
Okay, Corey does this funny thing where he's like, I'm leaving. And he like, Feeney completely ignores him. Corey leaves, closes the door, and then he's like, he opens the door, comes back, and he's like, oh, come on, man. Like it's so funny. Like you can do that with 11-year-olds because they already feel bad. Like you couldn't do that with a high schooler, which I teach high school, because they would actually just leave. But like an 11-year-old is young enough to be like, damn it, I know I'm not supposed to leave, you know?
Yes, exactly.
And I did teach middle school, and I do miss that about them. Like they're still a little bit scared. High school, nah. So Corey says that detention is cruel and unusual, life-sucking torture. And Feeney says, you've captured the essence. And Feeney starts the conversation about like, I don't understand why I have to be here because I don't understand love. Like that's dumb. And he says to Feeney, I know in your heart that you agree that love is stupid. Like it leads to no good. That's, I think, what he says specifically. And Feeney's like, and what brings you to that conclusion? And he's still kind of like he's not really giving Corey a lot of attention yet.
He's a little disengaged.
Good word. And Corey says, because you and I had dinner together last night. And that's when Feeney looks up. And I loved the look he gave. He's such a good actor.
He's very good. How would you describe that look?
He looks at him like Corey has just penetrated the play that they were in. Like they were both playing roles. Corey was a student, Feeney was a teacher. And Corey just said something that tapped into the true Mr. Feeney, right? What's his first name?
Ooh, great question. George, of course. George Feeney.
So he said something that hit George, right?
Yes.
Not Mr. Feeney.
Mr. Feeney.
And it was so good. He continues with like, I had chocolate pie and you had salad for two all by yourself. And Feeney's like, how did you know that? And Corey explains, like, I was in my treehouse, and the reason I'm in my treehouse is because love is messing up my family, because his brother has chosen a girl over him. And Feeney slams the pencil down, and thus begins his speech. He says, you shrewd little observer of the human condition. Which is another thing that an 11-year-old would have no idea what that means. To put it into context, I was reading The Giver with a group of 7th graders once who are 12, not 11. And we got to the part where Jonas says that at first he's like, oh, I don't have to care about that. And then he stops and he's like, the writer writes, the narrator says, of course he had to care. It was the meaning of everything. And I love that part. And I wrote it on the board and we started to unpack it. And my students had no idea what it meant. Like they didn't even know where to begin. And so I'm looking, and so then I like zoom in on the second sentence. I'm like, it was the meaning of everything. It, the pronoun it. What is it referring to? No idea. Care is the meaning of everything. Care. So I write that. Okay, care is the meaning of everything. What does that mean? Silence, nothing. They have no idea. That's when I was like, I have to teach high school. I can't teach middle school anymore. I can't do it. So no, you shrewd little observer of the human condition. They don't know what shrewd means. They don't know what the human condition refers to. They barely know what observer means. So anyway, I just think it's hilarious how he speaks to him. But this was why I wanted to do this podcast, because as an adult watching this show, I am fully watching it through the parents and the teachers' lenses, right?
Yes.
And it's different. It hits different.
It absolutely hits different.
Totally. The show is not for kids. It's for adults.
But it is as well. Because I feel Corey's position as a kid. And, I remember watching the show, thinking of Mr. Feeney as like a buzzkill, to anything that Corey wanted to do is like, Mr. Feeney, always giving him detention. And now I fully understand why Mr. Feeney did everything that he did for him. It makes sense.
It does and it doesn't. With this episode, I had a lot of feelings about like the expectations that he had for an 11-year-old to, like, he's literally punishing let me separate two things here. He's punishing him for listening to a ball game in the middle of his class. Valid. Okay. I support that. They turned it into him punishing him for not being engaged or, giving enough reverence to the topic of love.
It was the first of many, many Mr. Feeney life lessons.
Totally.
Maybe using detention to get his point across was probably not the best idea, but we can forgive Mr. Feeney.
No, but again, like if you just say Corey was listening to the radio in the middle of class, like I don't know, like and these days it's happening so much because of phones, and kids are not getting a detention every time they use their phones in class. It's just not happening. But back then, I feel like in a certain school, it would make sense that you would get detention for doing something like that. But I think what they're skipping over is like, because the response is, well, maybe if your class was more engaging, the kid wouldn't feel the need to go and listen to the game. And so they've skipped that part and they've gone right to, you not being engaged in this lesson because you don't believe in love or, whatever. That's the issue here. And we need to fix that so that you're more engaged next time, because this is an important topic. So he says, to have lived so little and yet have already reached your conclusions about the greatest wonder of the universe. And he goes on to say, like, Shakespeare wrote plays and sonnets, the Greeks wrote tragedies and comedies, Robert Burns, Emily Dickinson, the Brownings examined the depths of human emotion. And you know what each one of those poets, playwrights, and philosophers had in common, Mr. Matthews? And Corey says, they all took your class? And Mr. Feeney goes, every one of them was older than 11. And for me, that was the moment when I was like, exactly. Like, how can you expect an 11-year-old to be interested or engaged in something that it doesn't hit him because he's not interested in it. It's just not his body's not ready to be, thinking about that stuff. I think at 11 for a lot of kids, it is, but anyway, for him, it's not. And then also, like, he just hasn't had the lifetime of experience that one needs. And then this is the crux of the issue with teaching, because we are constantly teaching kids things that they need to be adults in order to understand. But the excuse is we're preparing them for adulthood. So we're always in this weird space where if we only read, books that were totally written for them, if we only, learned about social situations and issues that dealt with teenagers and adolescents, if we never learned about, wars, which were all adult, if we only, indulged in teen issues, school wouldn't prepare them for anything. It would just allow them to sit with what they are. And I think they'd be 100% engaged all the time, but they wouldn't be prepared for what's beyond. So I think a little bit of both is important.
I absolutely agree that both is important because it's a balance of keeping them engaged, but also kind of planting seeds for the future. There are countless moments in my life where I look back on something that somebody taught me that I didn't get at the time, but I get it now. And I think that is important. I wouldn't know what I know now if I wasn't told what I was told back then. So even if it takes a couple of years for something to click, it will have been worth it.
Totally. So many of the novels I read in high school went over my head at the time, or I didn't really understand why we were spending so much time on it. And now as an adult, I'm like, oh, that makes sense now. So Fina goes on. You come into my classroom at the beginning of the year, and at the end you go, and I really don't know if in the time we spent together, I have taught you anything. Rough. There is nothing worse than just like pouring your heart and soul into like planning lessons and teaching kids, and then just seeing them not care or just not be engaged or not see what you're trying to do, or just at the very least kind of sit with some respect for what you're trying to do, even if they don't get it, like to at least be like, she's trying something here, you know? But yeah, I don't blame them. It's just hard. And this afternoon, Mr. Matthews, you are going to learn something from me. Do I have your attention? And the way that Corey says, yes, sir.
I saw the look in his eyes.
Right?
He's incredible.
He's so good.
Yeah. I felt that through him. Like,
right?
I was trying to articulate what that emotion was, because it felt like a combination of a lot. He really portrayed a lot of feelings in that look. It was fear. It was, what is the word for, like, I guess respect, like
reverence.
That's the word. That's exactly the word I was thinking. Reverence and a little bit of fear for sure.
Totally.
And it was incredible.
That was Corey's version of Feeney's look when Corey said we ate dinner together last night.
Snaps.
And I don't know if they had an amazing acting coach or if that was like just Ben Savage being a savage because he killed it, but it was very good.
That should be a new thing that we have when he's being a savage through the series.
Savage. Feeney goes on. I live across the fence from you, and it's impossible not to notice the people who live in the next yard over. And through the years, I've gotten to know them. It is apparent that they are fine individuals. He's talking about Corey's family. But their real strength comes from being a family. And I think that they did a great job, by the way, of setting us up for that.
Yes.
By showing us the relationship between the family members.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely. Everybody had their moment together as a family.
Yes. Morgan and Corey had moments.
Yes.
Mom and Corey, Dad and Corey, Eric and Corey, Eric and Mom.
Yeah.
It's so...
Corey and Dad.
Corey and Dad.
Knowing about the past with the playing of the football.
Oh,
yeah.
Chills. I just got chills.
Yeah.
How did they do this in 22 minutes?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my God, it's so good.
Wait, this episode just got so good. Oh.
I'm telling you, this show needs to be unpacked. That's why we're doing this podcast. Because the writing is so good. Okay. So they all had their moment, right? So he says, because they're a family. And do you know why they're a family? Because at one time, a man and a woman realized that they loved each other. I'm going to get emotional. And pursued the unlimited potential of what may come from that love. And here you are. First of all, he's talking to him about sex.
I know. I was like, Mr. Feeney.
Mr. Feeney. You're in a room alone with a... By the way, these days, we're not allowed to be alone in a room with a student with the door closed. Can you believe?
Wow, I can believe it, unfortunately.
So I was thinking about that a lot. And I was like, oh, stress. And then when he said that, I was like, no. I was like, don't get fired, Mr. Feeney. You can't say that anymore. But it was so good. And it just tied in with the message. So, I mean, that was the message, right? It's love is it's the big bang of life. To put it in that way and to say like, cause this show is about the nuclear family, right? It's very conservative in that way. It's all about like boy meets girl.
But yeah, I mean, it is conservative in the sense that Corey meets Topanga, and like they only date each other except for that one episode we'll get to.
Tea bunny. We love it.
But they're essentially the only ones that are they're the only people they date, and I think they even wait till their wedding
they do.
night.
They wait.
Yeah. Yeah. So very much the show is very much a fan of the nuclear family.
Totally.
Yeah.
There's even a point where Topanga, which is interesting because she starts off as really liberal and new agey, and then she kind of like switches and becomes a little more conservative like later in the show. She says something like, I think that like the biggest downfall of America is like the devaluation of like the nuclear family or something like that. And I was like, oh, she really just said it.
Wow.
Yes.
Interesting. Topanga.
Yeah, Topanga of all people. I can't wait for that episode. Anyway, so Feeney finishes his speech. There is no greater aspiration than to have love in our lives. Romeo knew it and died for it. Which brings me back to like, was it Romeo really understanding that love is worth dying for, or was it a kid being infatuated with someone making an impulsive decision, because that is a very teenager-y thing to do?
Yeah.
Being blinded by his hormones. And then says this particular detention is over. I don't have much more to say. The episode ends with basically Corey does apologize to his like, I ditched you and I'm sorry, which is really sweet. And very like mature of him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And he also comes around to supporting Eric with his date, because Eric comes back from his date and he's like, she was awesome. Her date, meaning him, was terrible. The way that they talk to each other is really cute. Like they don't say things directly. And I think that's like earlier, the way that Eric told Corey that he was asking this girl to the game and was not taking Corey was he was like, and I got worse news for you. And Corey's like, me and her going to the game? And then like Eric's just like, come on, man, like blah, blah, blah. And he jumps to like, okay, we already know that he's taking this girl. Like he never said it outright. And that happens again here where he's just like, she was awesome, but her date wasn't. Like he never says like, I was so embarrassing on this date, which I think brothers tend to kind of talk in that way where it's like around the statement. So that was done well, I thought.
It felt realistic.
It felt realistic, yeah. And Corey basically hands him the phone and is like, call her, ask her out again. Yeah. I mean, I don't get it, but...
Yeah, I was going to say he probably doesn't get it, but he is going to support him anyway.
Which is really sweet. And we get a cute moment between Morgan and Corey, where Corey offers to take Morgan to bed. And Mom's like, why? And he's like, because I don't understand anything about my life. And then the button on the episode is Feeney asking the teacher out that from the beginning scene, after he basically tells Corey, like, I am with you 4 hours in the morning and 3 hours in the afternoon. Get out of my face, which I felt that. And then his like friend comes over, Ellen, which I totally eat lunch with my friends at work and I'm not mean to the kids, but like I definitely prefer to spend some time with adults.
That is sacred time, as Mr. Feeney points out.
Totally. So he's been eating lunch with Ellen, and then he asks her out at the end.
Is it safe to assume that the person he was supposed to eat dinner with was her? Or is that left up to interpretation?
That was, I believe, what we were supposed to assume.
Okay.
I assumed it.
Me too.
Yeah. And then it comes out later that he was, because she asks him something and he responds like, oh, I was supposed to have dinner with my sister the other night, but she canceled on me. And then Corey's like, what? And Feeney's like, confused, Mr. Matthews. And then he's like, as it should be. Which is like self-awareness, right? Of him being like, I know that I talk above you and I know that the things that I teach you are like maybe not what you need in this moment.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I relish in confusing you, and I have a bigger plan for you.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so exciting. That makes me want to watch more.
Good, because you're gonna. Every freaking episode.
Now, we have not talked about our best fashion moment.
Oh my God. What was your fashion moment?
Mine wore these shorts that Corey was wearing in one of the last scenes when he was talking to Eric in their bedroom.
Wait.
And the reason I say this is because I used to own a pair of these shorts. It was... it's not plaid, but it was like plaid adjacent. It was like, it was
Madras.
Is that the pattern of.
I don't remember these shorts though, so
he
I
was
can't
wearing
say
a
yes or
really
no.
long shirt over it, so it was kind of hard to see the shorts. But I saw them, and I was like, I used to own a pair of those shorts. They were so popular in 2009. Every girl my age had like knee-length shorts that had plaid on them, and it was a look, to say the least.
Wait, now that you say that, did we ever say when this aired?
I don't think so.
We did not. This aired September 24th, 1993.
Wow.
So they were back in 2009. That makes sense. I feel like things come back around, right? My fashion moment was a sweater that Eric was wearing.
Oh, I loved that sweater.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
It was striped and colorful, but it was
kind of like an ugly sweater, and I mean that in the best way.
In the best way.
Yes. I used to have ugly sweaters were also like really big when I was in college, and I used to do this really fun mystery package where you would just order a sweater in your size, and it would be a random, like, you have no idea what you're ordering except for the size of the sweater, and you would get an ugly sweater.
You had money to burn.
No, it was very cheap.
What are your takeaways?
My takeaways are, I think this was a really great first episode for Boy Meets World, given what the rest of the series gives us as far as like love, relationships, like family dynamics and all that stuff, especially the relationship with Corey and Mr. Feeney. I thought this was a really good setup for all of that.
Totally.
And I think talking about it with you today, as somebody who did not read Romeo and Juliet, for you to kind of explain all of that and the symbolism and how that relates to the show and the story and the characters was a fascinating thing to do, and I think that I thought it worked perfectly. My
takeaway is very similar. For me, I'm going to approach takeaways in this podcast more as like, what am I going to take with me through into my life? So less like, I thought this was good for the episode or for the series. For me, what it helped me intuit, like what it helped me learn or remember, was that love is like the glue that's holding all of this shit together.
Yeah.
Like all of these families that exist came about because people loved each other and decided to stick together and support each other, right? And schools and institutions and organizations and anything that is anything. I mean, it's the quote from The Giver. Care is the meaning of everything. If you don't care, you have nothing exists. Nothing stays together. There's no reason to do anything.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So ironically, my takeaway is a quote from
The Giver.
Lois Lowry's The Giver. Care is the meaning of everything.
I wonder if Boy Meets World will use that book.
I don't think they do. They tend to go like classic literary stuff, which is why I like it.
When did The Giver come out?
1993.
Oh, interesting.
That's the year that Boy Meets World came out. Oh my God, that is interesting.
Very interesting.
What? Crazy. Cool. So that's it. If you enjoyed what you heard, please rate and review us. If you didn't like it, go away. You don't have to listen anymore.
Yeah, it's fine.
If you got this far, though, maybe you liked it, but you don't want to admit it to yourself. The name of the wine that we had today was La Scolca. Gavi. Next week's episode is called On the Fence. Corey paints shutters to repay his father. Bye.
Bye.
Cheers.